A hornet drops onto the wooden lip of the hive entrance, its legs braced, its antennae sweeping through the warm air coming from inside. For a moment, it looks like a simple contest of size. The hornet is armored, sharp, and confident. The bees are smaller, softer looking, and packed tightly around a dark opening filled with honey, brood, and the scent of the colony. Then the entrance changes. One guard bee rushes forward and touches the intruder with her antennae. Another appears beside her. Then another. Wings flicker. Legs scrape against wax and wood. Bodies collide in quick, deliberate bursts. The hornet steps toward the opening, but the space around it begins to fill with bees. This is not panic. It is pressure. A honeybee colony is often imagined as defending itself in the most obvious way. An enemy appears, bees get angry, and stingers come out. That part is real. A sting can be painful, dangerous, and in the case of a worker honeybee, deadly for the bee that delivers it. But the sting is only one layer. Long before venom enters skin, the hive is already working. Guards are checking scents at the door. Chemical alarms are spreading through the air. Workers are being recruited. The intruder is being marked, surrounded, bitten, blocked, heated, or driven away, depending on what it is and how dangerous it becomes. A hive does not defend itself like a single animal with one weapon. It defends itself like a living system. Each bee has limited information. Each bee reacts to touch, smell, vibration, temperature, and the behavior of the bees around her. But together, those small reactions become something larger. A colony that can screen arrivals, raise an alarm, concentrate defenders, sacrifice individuals, and in some cases turn thousands of bodies into a weapon. The hornet at the entrance is not just facing a few insects. It has crossed into a detection zone. The first bees it meets are older workers, stationed near the opening like living inspectors. They do not rely on sight alone. They read scent. Every colony has its own chemical signature, a shared odor carried across bodies, wax, food, and nest material. A nestmate smells right. A stranger may not. Robber bees, wasps, hornets, ants, beetles, and even larger animals can all trigger different levels of defense. The response changes with the season, the strength of the colony, the amount of nectar outside, and whether the hive has recently been attacked. When robbing pressure is high, the entrance may become narrower, more crowded, more tightly controlled. The doorway is not just an opening. It is a checkpoint made of bees. And once one guard decides the shape at the entrance is a threat, the defense stops being local. A signal begins to move. Not a shout, not a command, but a chemical message released into the air and onto the target. The hidden battle has already begun. The first alarm is invisible. A guard bee bends her abdomen and releases a sharp chemical signal from the region of her sting apparatus. Other defenders catch it almost instantly through their antennae. The smell is often compared to bananas because one major compound in honeybee alarm pheromone is isoamyl acetate. But inside the hive entrance, it does not mean fruit. It means focus here. The signal changes the behavior of the bees around it. A worker that might have continued grooming, feeding brood, or moving through the entrance becomes more likely to rush forward, more likely to bite, more likely to sting, more likely to pursue the moving shape that now carries the colony's chemical warning. The hornet is no longer being judged by one guard. It is being translated into a message. Alarm pheromone can cling to the intruder, marking it as the center of the attack. Each new bee that reaches the target may add more signal. The defense recruits itself in layers, with chemistry turning one confrontation into a crowd. This is why smoke can calm a hive. It does not make bees forget that danger exists. It interferes with the chemical conversation and can trigger feeding behavior, making the alarm harder to organize. Then the visible weapons come online. A worker honeybee drives her sting into a soft-skinned enemy with a barbed shaft connected to a venom sac. Against insects, the sting may sometimes be pulled free. Against elastic skin, like that of a mammal or bird, the barbs catch. When the bee tears herself away, part of her abdomen can rip loose with the sting apparatus still embedded. The bee is mortally wounded, but the weapon keeps working. The detached sting can continue to pump venom for a short time, a tiny autonomous delivery system left behind in the skin. The venom is a chemical cocktail: melittin that disrupts cell membranes, phospholipase A2 that helps drive inflammation and allergic reactions, histamine and other compounds that make the injury burn, swell, and demand attention. For a bear, a skunk, a bird, or a human hand reaching into the hive, the purpose is not always instant death. It is pain. It is memory. It is the lesson that this cavity in a tree, this box, this humming wall of wax and honey is not worth tearing open again. One sting hurts. Many stings change the risk completely. The venom dose rises, the alarm grows stronger, and every marked point can draw more defenders. For allergic individuals, even a small number of stings can become dangerous. For a colony, the cost is also real. Each worker that dies after stinging is lost labor, lost foraging, lost care for the brood. But the colony is the unit being protected. A single worker's life is weighed against the queen, the larvae, the stored honey, and the tens of thousands of sisters that make the hive possible. That is why sacrifice can make biological sense. The sting is not an act of anger. It is a final tool in a defense system built around the survival of the whole. And when stinging is not enough, the hive changes tactics. Bees begin to pile onto the intruder. Bodies press against legs and wings. Mandibles grip. Workers bite, shove, and cling. A small beetle may be dragged out. A wasp may be pinned at the entrance. Movement becomes harder, then almost impossible, as the colony turns its own bodies into restraints. Against certain hornets, this pressure becomes something even stranger. Japanese honeybees, facing Japanese giant hornets, can form a dense living ball around the predator. The bees pack in tightly, surrounding the hornet on all sides. Then they vibrate their flight muscles, not to fly, but to generate heat. Inside the ball, the temperature climbs toward roughly 46 degrees Celsius. That number is the key. The hornet's lethal temperature sits close to that range. The bees can tolerate slightly more heat, but only for a limited time. The colony is exploiting a narrow physiological gap, holding itself at the edge of danger to push the predator just beyond its limit. Carbon dioxide builds inside the ball as well, adding stress to the trapped hornet. The result is not a wild swarm losing control. It is a coordinated thermal attack. The bees cook the invader alive at a temperature they can barely survive themselves. Not every hive can do this. The heat ball is not a universal bee trick, and that is what makes it even more revealing. Japanese honeybees evolved under pressure from giant hornets, so their defense is shaped around a predator capable of destroying a colony. European honeybees, facing that same hornet, are often less effective because their history trained them against different enemies. Defense is not just instinct in the abstract. It is a record of what has tried to get inside. Bumblebees defend their nests too, but their colonies are smaller and organized differently. Most bee species do not live in giant colonies at all. Many are solitary, with no huge storehouse of honey, no army of sisters, and no superorganism to mobilize. Stingless bees, despite the name, are not helpless. Some bite. Some use sticky resins. Some build narrow entrances, post guards, or use chemical defenses suited to their own enemies. The image of the angry honeybee swarm is only one version of bee defense. Across the bee world, the same problem has many solutions. Protect the nest, protect the young, protect the future. And some of that protection happens before any enemy arrives. Inside a honeybee hive, workers collect sticky plant resins and turn them into propolis, a dark, fragrant material that seals cracks and smooths rough spaces. Propolis can close unwanted openings, strengthen the boundary of the nest, and help create a chemical environment that resists microbes. The hive wall is not just a wall. It is part architecture, part medicine, part immune system. Bees also manage space. A smaller entrance is easier to guard. Dead bees, diseased material, and debris are removed when workers can remove them. The colony is constantly maintaining the difference between inside and outside, healthy and dangerous, nestmate and intruder. So the defense of a hive is not a single moment of violence. It is a continuous boundary. It is guards tasting the air with their antennae. It is alarm pheromone turning one bee's discovery into a shared response. It is venom that creates pain and memory. It is workers willing to die because the colony matters more than the individual. It is bodies becoming a wall, a cage, a furnace. It is resin packed into cracks long before claws or mandibles test the entrance. Return to the hornet on the wooden lip of the hive. At first, it looked like a predator approaching scattered insects, but it has actually stepped into a system that can sense it, label it, recruit against it, and choose a defense scaled to the threat. No single bee understands the whole battle. One bee smells alarm. One grips a leg. One releases venom. One vibrates in the heat of a living ball. One seals a gap in the hive wall on a quiet day when nothing is attacking. Together, their actions become a kind of intelligence that does not need a central commander. It emerges from thresholds, signals, bodies, and shared risk. A hive is not simply a home full of bees. It is a living boundary, warm with brood and honey, guarded by chemistry and muscle, able to turn fearsome small lives into one coordinated defense.